and they begin to get a group of people to continue to share and build and build. This is what he meant by the blind leading the blind. The enemy will eventually make that person harden of heart because they'll believe that no one loves them, no one cares for them. They'll grab a hold of that and they'll share it with others. And then before you know it, every sheep that had weaknesses that listened to that, it will convince them over time of what's going to happen. We even had one, as we said, had a clear a dream. This dream was not one of those, a lot of times the dreams that God gives me, I got to kind of study a little bit to get interpreted. I don't get the clear vision of what he said. But one that had a dream, it clearly said half the church is going to go over the hill. And the other half is going to stay. The ones that go over the hill are going to be the ones that gets destroyed. And the ones that stay is going to want to see the vision. But they even didn't get it. And when God clearly showed them. See what is going on and how the enemy works and how he brings these things and how he brings them to pass. How he works on just starting with one individual. He could just start with one. And before you know it, it's 10 or 15 that's willing to listen to things that don't line up with the Word. Or talking bad about Brian or John or anybody. Start talking bad about them. And at first it seems, well, yeah, you're right. They may have been bad that time, but they keep talking. And you keep convoing, and it's called gossip. And that gossip will eventually convince you that Brian is a bad individual, whether there any truth to it or not. And there's not no truth to it. And it'll put everybody against Brian that listens to that. And they'll eventually, and that's why he said, separate yourself from these kind of people. You better separate yourself, because I'm going to tell you, they'll get a hold of you. This is what he's meaning right here in these scriptures. They'll get a hold of you. And they'll grab a hold of it. But if you'll separate yourself, and as he said, and he went on, he said, then you will become thankful and appreciative, and you'll realize what Christ has done, and you'll enter the gates with praise and thanksgiving. But if you don't separate yourself, it's going to pull you along with them. And you're going to become a group of that. What we need to listen to is the Word. Good things about one another. Hey, I'm going to make mistakes. You don't need to be listening about my mistakes. You need to be listening about the good. And the same about you. You're going to make mistakes. I don't need to be spreading around about your mistakes. I need to be spreading around about the good things you've done. And see what we hear, then it lifts us up about how good that person is. It works both ways. It works both ways. As John has told us, there's life and death in the power of the tongue. If we're speaking life, then we get life. But if we're speaking that death, it spreads it. It'll spread life, or we can spread death. Many's been spreading death. They have. And I know who they have been for months. The Lord has showed me for months the people that's been in that shape. And I prayed, I've cried, I've fasted, I've done everything that I could think of to try to convince people. I even wanted to approach them, but I know that the best thing to do is I better not. I better be slow to speak, because they'll get, if they don't understand, they don't think it's them, they're going to attack you. If I came to John right now and he was in that shape and I said, John, you're gossiping, blah, 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 and I get nowhere. I don't help him, and all it does is drive a wedge between us. So I cried and fasted and done everything that I could do, even though I know several months ago God said ground zero. But last Tuesday, God released me from it when He said, Samuel, you're disgracing me by crying about what's going on. I made this decision, not you. This was my call. I warned. Saul was warned too. Well, Saul knowed what to do was right and what was wrong. He didn't obey the Lord. Therefore, God removed the anointing from him and said he will no longer be king. And Samuel began to cry, and then he told him, shut up. It's my decision, and you're disgracing me. Pick yourself up and go on. I made the call. You didn't do it. You didn't destroy them. You didn't tear them down. You didn't bring them into that position. You didn't bring them into these things. I hope you get a clear picture of if someone is talking to you bad things, you better break away from them. You better separate yourself. And if you hear them, you know how to stop that? If you come out and tell them the truth. If you tell them the truth. Hey, that's gossip and I don't want to hear it. They won't call you no more, I don't believe. It'll surprise me if they keep calling you. And keep calling you and trying to get you to listen to that stuff. And keep trying to grab hold of that stuff. But if you'll tell them the truth and say, hey, you're putting down a brother and sister, or hey, I don't want to listen to that stuff. Whatever went on, I don't want to hear it. It ain't got nothing to do with me. I got all my problems. I got enough. I don't need to hear anything else. But boy, as a fleshly individual, we love to hear bad things. We do. You know, who died? What? I mean, we want to grab a hold of it. But we got to learn to start walking in spirit, not in flesh. And we got to learn to start putting people in place that wants to grab a hold of it. That the weak sheep that the wolf grabs hold of and pulls to the side and begins to convince them of things. And then they can begin to try to get relief and begin to spread it. And before you know it, instead of 1 or 2, it's 10 or 15. That's how churches divide. Over something crazy. And I made mistakes. And over a mistake maybe I made. Divide a whole church over it. Or cause envy and strife in a body of believers over a mistake that I made. It's going to cause that. The penalty, you can read it in 1 Corinthians, of causing envy and strife in a body of believers. God said, I'll drop the hedge. I'll allow the enemy at you and I'll turn a deaf ear to you. But it happens. And it has been happening. And I know exactly what's been going on. I'm not ignorant to the fact. God clearly says what's done in darkness is brought to light. You can't hide it. I know, and I know. The Lord protects the church. He shows the shepherd things. He knows things. But the shepherd keeps his mouth quiet about a lot of things until God says share it. Or go to that person or whatever. You go at the wrong time, you'll get wiped plumb out, I'm telling you. I've been there. I've been cussed out. I've been tore down. I've been called a cult leader. I've been called a lot of things. And I often wonder, well, Lord, why is there such attack against my wife about all these situations? When it's me bringing the truth. When it's me walking on people's toes. When it's me doing these things. And it breaks me down. And I understood as the Lord began to show me. He said, because the devil can't get at you when people get in your face and tell you these things. It don't stop you from preaching. It don't stop you from spreading the truth. But it hurts you when your family hurts. It hurts you when your family hurts. So the enemy knows how to get at you. So therefore he convinces people to come against your wife. And that way it hurts you. The enemy knows how to hurt you. He knows what it takes. One of my strengths is not to let people destroy me. I've made mistakes along the way. I have. I've been attacked. You've seen it. You've seen it before. You've seen me be attacked several times with several different things. I've often questioned, even myself, and said, Lord, am I missing it or what? I've even approached good brethren that has been in this church and said, hey, you think I'm doing something wrong? Am I missing it? Am I preaching it wrong? He said, no, what your problem is, you're preaching the truth and you're preaching the Word. That's what your problem is. Jesus was persecuted for it, and you will be too. We've got to take the truth and take it on. But the enemy knows that's why my wife gets attacked. And why it gets attacked on her, because it influences me. That's how he can influence me. My son being attacked at work because where I run that operation down there, they're being mean to him. The enemy knows how to attack me, come at my family. At that church that we was at before, I stood and took the attacks and kept going on because God hadn't told me to leave. Even though we were talked to like dogs many times about many things and pretty much put down below the earth or lower than earthworms about many things. Spread in the public about thieves, we're thieves, and etc. All these things spread amongst us. But I stood in the ground and stood in the battlefields because the Lord hadn't told me to leave. And